The teaspoon trembled against the rim of the cup, a small, lonely sound in a café that had forgotten him. Steam rose and vanished, just like the life he used to have, and for a moment the single dad wondered if anyone would notice if he disappeared too. That was when 3 tiny shadows fell across his table, and everything he thought he knew about loss, loneliness, and fate began to shift. Before the story pulls you in any deeper, take a second to pause. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen between ordinary people, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are waiting to be reminded they're not alone. He had chosen the cafe because it was forgettable. Brown tables, chipped mugs, a window streaked with rain, and the soft murmur of strangers who didn't care who he was. It was the kind of place where a man could sit with his tea and grief and not be asked questions. His name was Aaron, and at 36, his life felt older than it should have. He wore exhaustion like a second coat. His wife had died 2 years earlier, suddenly and unfairly, leaving behind silence in their home and a question that never stopped echoing: how does one person carry love meant for two? Their son lived with his grandparents now, not because Aaron didn't love him, but because grief had hollowed him out so badly that breathing some days felt like work. Aaron told himself it was temporary, that he would get stronger, that he would be whole again. But weeks turned into months, and months into years, and the cafe became his refuge from the apartment that smelled like memories. The afternoon light slanted through the window as rain slid down the glass like slow tears. Aaron stared into his tea, watching the surface ripple when his hand shook. He thought about bills stacked unopened, about job applications unanswered, about birthdays missed. He thought about the way people spoke to him now with careful voices, as if he were something fragile that might crack. He didn't hear the soft footsteps at first. He didn't notice the way the air around him changed, charged with something unexpected and small. They were 3 little girls, identical in the way that made people stop and stare, with matching coats and hair pulled back in uneven ponytails. Their faces carried a seriousness that didn't belong to children so young, the kind of seriousness that comes from learning too early how the world can forget you. They hovered near his table, glancing back toward the counter where a distracted barista struggled with a broken machine. Aaron felt them before he saw them, the way you feel a storm gathering. When he finally looked up, their eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them. It was not a request yet, just a fragile hope hanging in the air. They leaned closer, their voices low and urgent, explaining in breathless fragments that they needed him to pretend, just for a moment, that he was their father. Not because they wanted to play, but because the world had taught them that being alone was dangerous. Aaron's first instinct was to pull back. He had spent so long avoiding responsibility, afraid of failing again, afraid of loving and losing. But as he looked at them, he saw fear tucked behind bravery, and something in his chest cracked open. Without thinking, he nodded, shifting his chair, making space at the table as if it had always been meant for 4. From that moment, the cafe felt different. Aaron became aware of the warmth of their presence, the way their coats brushed his arm, the faint scent of soap and rain. He held his cup with steadier hands now, grounding himself in the role they had handed him so casually. He noticed how one of the girls kept watch on the door, how another fidgeted constantly, how the third leaned into the others as if drawing strength from their closeness. These were not children accustomed to safety. They were children who had learned to survive together. Time stretched and folded in on itself. Aaron answered questions with gentle authority, nodding and smiling when strangers glanced their way. He felt something unfamiliar bloom inside him, a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. When the moment passed and the girls' tension eased, they lingered, reluctant to leave the small island of calm they had created. Eventually, a social worker arrived. Apologies spilling out, along with explanations about a mix-up at a nearby shelter, about how the girls had wandered in while waiting. Aaron listened, his chest tight, as the girls were gently ushered away, each one turning back to look at him as if trying to memorize his face. The cafe returned to its quiet hum, but Aaron's world had shifted. He sat there long after his tea went cold, replaying the encounter in his mind. He realized how natural it had felt to protect, to be needed. That night, the apartment didn't feel quite as empty. He slept deeper than he had in months, dreams filled with small hands and cautious smiles. Days later, he couldn't stop thinking about them. He learned their names through a phone call he almost didn't make, his voice shaking as he explained who he was and why he cared. The girls were sisters, triplets who had lost their parents in an accident that mirrored his own loss too closely to be coincidence. They had bounced between temporary homes, their bond the only constant. Aaron found himself visiting the shelter under the pretense of donating supplies, then staying longer than planned, reading stories, helping with homework, sitting on the floor feeling awkward and alive. The challenges came quickly and without mercy. The shelter was overcrowded, resources thin, and the future uncertain. Aaron battled his own demons alongside practical obstacles, paperwork that seemed designed to discourage hope, finances that barely balanced, nights when fear whispered that he was not enough. There were moments when grief resurfaced with cruel clarity, reminding him of the family he had lost and the risk of opening his heart again. Yet every time doubt threatened to pull him under, he remembered the way the girls had trusted him without knowing his story, the way they had chosen him in a moment of desperation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Aaron took a steady job, swallowing his pride and accepting help from friends he had pushed away. He attended counseling, learning to sit with pain instead of running from it. The girls, in turn, began to relax around him, their laughter coming easier, their eyes brighter. They still carried scars, but they also carried hope now, something fragile but growing. There were setbacks. A potential placement fell through, sending the girls into a spiral of fear that broke Aaron's heart. He questioned his motives, his capacity, his right to want them in his life. But in those moments of crisis, he discovered resilience he didn't know he possessed. He showed up again and again, proving not just to the system but to himself that he could be steady, that he could stay. The day the approval finally came was unremarkable on the surface, just an email read in a cluttered kitchen. But to Aaron, it felt like the world exhaled. He cried alone, grief and joy tangled together, mourning what was lost while welcoming what was possible. When the girls arrived with their small bags, the apartment filled with noise and movement and life. The walls that had once echoed now held drawings and schedules and the beautiful chaos of shared existence. Time moved forward, as it always does. There were school mornings filled with mismatched socks and rushed breakfasts, evenings of shared stories and quiet comfort. Aaron learned that fatherhood was not about perfection but presence, not about erasing pain but making room for it alongside love. The girls learned that adults could stay, that promises could be kept, that families could be built from broken pieces. As you watch this story unfold, if it's touching something deep inside you, please pause for a moment near the end to like the video, share it, and subscribe. These simple actions help keep stories of hope alive and reaching those who need them most. Years later, Aaron sometimes returned to the café, now with 3 taller shadows at his side. He would watch them laugh, their voices filling the space that once held only his sorrow. He would remember the man he used to be, hunched over a cup of tea, unaware that his life was about to change because 3 brave girls dared to ask for safety in the only way they knew how. Just before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what part of this story moved you the most, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Your words matter more than you know. The truth Aaron learned, and the truth this story leaves behind, is that healing rarely arrives with grand gestures. Sometimes it comes as a whisper in a quiet cafe, as a chance to pretend that turns into a promise, as the courage to say yes when everything inside you is afraid. And if this story touched your heart even a little, let it remind you that broken people can build beautiful families, and that sometimes the ones who save us are the ones who ask us to pretend we're stronger than we think, until one day we realize we truly are.